Hey everyone, and welcome back. Quick question for you. What's the single most powerful country in the world? Go ahead, answer it in your head. I bet for almost all of you, the answer was the United States. Maybe you said China. Perhaps you're feeling nostalgic and you said the UK. And honestly, for the last 80 years, that was a pretty safe bet. We've been living in a world defined by the Pax Americana, a world policed, financed, and largely influenced by Washington, D.C. But what if I told you that while we've all been focused on the headlines, the military spending, and the constant political drama, a quiet, almost invisible shift has been happening underneath our feet? A shift so fundamental that the old maps of global power are becoming completely obsolete. We're not talking about a war. We're not talking about a sudden economic collapse. We're talking about power itself changing hands. See, power isn't just tanks and aircraft carriers anymore. It's also supply chains, it's fiber optic cables, it's rare earth minerals, and it's who controls the debt. For decades, the US controlled the off-ramps of the global economy. They controlled the banking, the security, and the internet. But a group of countries, once seen as minor players or simply sources of cheap labor, have been quietly building a new, parallel infrastructure, a whole new set of rules and roads that bypasses the old gatekeepers entirely. By the end of this video, you will understand why the battle for global supremacy isn't happening in the South China Sea or the halls of the UN. It's happening on a dusty highway in Pakistan, in a server farm in India, and in a massive trade deal you barely heard about. This is the story of the global power shift you didn't see coming, and trust me, it's already changing everything. Let's start with how we used to measure power. It was simple, right? You took the world map, you looked at the military budget, and you looked at the GDP. For nearly a century, the blueprint for a superpower was essentially the same: the ability to project force globally. The US military, with its bases scattered across every continent, its blue water navy, and its unrivaled technological edge, represented the zenith of this kind of power. And while that still matters a lot, it's slowly becoming an expensive, and sometimes irrelevant, game of checkers when the rest of the world has moved on to three-dimensional chess. Think about it. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. That means if you want to buy oil or natural gas, or basically anything big, you have to use US dollars. This gives the US an almost magical ability to essentially print money for its imports and, crucially, to sanction anyone they don't like. Mess up, and the US can kick you out of the dollar system, effectively locking you out of the majority of global trade. It was the ultimate lock and key system, and Washington held the key. But people don't like being locked out. And when you have one system that controls everything, the motivation for other players to build an alternative of Plan B becomes absolutely massive. The shift we're talking about has two components: physical and digital. Let's tackle the physical first. For over a decade, China has been spearheading the Belt and Road Initiative, a massive multi-trillion-dollar effort to connect Asia, Africa, and Europe through a network of ports, railways, pipelines, and highways. Forget the official names for a second and just see what it is. It's an entirely new global circulation system. When you build a new highway, who holds the power? The person who owns the land and the person who built the road. When the US dominated global trade, all the roads led to US-backed ports, through US-policed shipping lanes, and were settled in US banks. The traffic cops were American. Now suddenly there are parallel roads. A container ship from Shanghai can deliver goods to a port in Greece, which connects directly to a Chinese-built rail line that cuts through Europe, bypassing traditional sea routes policed by NATO. And it's not just China. Look at what the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now expanded to include Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others, is doing. They're not just having meetings. They're creating real-world alternatives. They're building their own interbank payment systems to compete with SWIFT, the US-dominated financial messaging system. They're trading in local currencies, meaning a country like Brazil can buy oil from Saudi Arabia using Brazilian reals instead of US dollars. It's less of a crash and more of an economic bypass. The car is still running, but the old toll road is suddenly seeing a lot less traffic. If the 20th century was defined by who controlled the oil, the 21st century is defined by who controls the data. And this is where the global power shift truly becomes invisible to most people. Think about how you use the internet. You probably use Google, Facebook, Amazon, or Microsoft. You are living inside an ecosystem largely dominated by US companies. Your digital identity, your data, and your communication protocols flow through their servers and their undersea cables. Now, imagine an entire global economy built on a different stack. For years, the US and its allies were ahead in cutting-edge microchips. But now, countries like China are pouring trillions into indigenous technology, from their own operating systems and their own search engines, like Baidu and Alibaba, to their own highly advanced semiconductor production capabilities. This isn't just about making phones. It's about building a digital moat. If you are a country, say, in Southeast Asia, and you build your 5G network using Ericsson or Nokia, your data security protocols align with the West. If you use Huawei, your data infrastructure aligns with the East. And since the underlying rules for data sharing, data privacy, and surveillance differ vastly between these two systems, the choice of equipment is fundamentally a geopolitical choice. The result? The Internet, once imagined as a single, open, global network, is fracturing. We are seeing the rise of a digital iron curtain where two massive separate digital ecosystems are forming, each with its own gravity pulling smaller countries into its orbit. And in this new reality, whoever builds the most attractive, functional, and cheapest digital stack for the developing world wins the future. This silent tectonic shift in global power is the most important story of our time, and it's happening right now. Alright, let's break down why the old superpower isn't keeping up. And no, this isn't about politics. It's about two massive internal headwinds: demographics and debt. First, the US, like a lot of Western nations, is getting older. The number of people retiring is growing way faster than the number of young workers entering the workforce. Think about it. Fewer people paying taxes into Social Security and Medicare, which have to support a ballooning number of retirees. That's a fundamental drag on productivity and an endless source of debt. Speaking of debt, the numbers are just staggering. As the US national debt continues to climb, it acts like a giant anchor, dragging down future growth. The government has to spend billions every single year just to pay the interest. That's money that isn't going into new infrastructure, research, or education. Meanwhile, look at the rising power hubs, places like India, parts of Southeast Asia, and even certain African nations. They have a massive youth bulge. An enormous, young, and motivated population that is ready to build, consume, and innovate. This demographic momentum is a powerful, long-term asset that the older powers simply can't match. It's a classic historical pattern. Empires often start to crumble from within, even as they're challenged from the outside. The cost of maintaining global military dominance while servicing historic debts and supporting an aging population is becoming financially unsustainable. So, we have new infrastructure, a new digital world, and a new demographic reality. Who are the winners in this new game? Now, the biggest misconception about this power shift is that it's a simple swap, US out, China in. That's way too simplistic. The real winners are what I call the swing states of global power. These are countries that are strategically essential, have large, young populations, and refuse to align exclusively with either the US-led West or the China-led East. They are aggressively practicing what's known as strategic autonomy. Take India. A democratic nation, a massive economy, and an absolutely vital market. India is courted relentlessly by the US, the EU, and Japan, but it also maintains strong trade and diplomatic ties with Russia and Iran. They're demanding the best deal from everyone, knowing they hold a critical swing vote on everything from military sales to climate change agreements. Or look at Saudi Arabia. Once a loyal security partner of the US, they are now diversifying wildly. They're cozying up to China for huge infrastructure and technology deals, negotiating peace with former rivals like Iran, and most critically, they're exploring selling oil in currencies other than the dollar. They are maximizing their leverage, realizing that the old US security umbrella is just one option, not the only option. These countries are the real beneficiaries of this shift. Their importance isn't defined by their military power. It's defined by their refusal to be tied to a single bloc. They can't be easily sanctioned, they can't be easily ignored, and they demand respect from both sides. This isn't a change from a unipolar world with one dominant power to a bipolar world with two rivals. It's a shift to a multipolar world, where power is fluid, transactional, and decentralized. It's messy, it's complex, and it's incredibly dynamic. But all of this, the ports, the pipelines, the data centers, it's just the scaffolding. The final, most crucial domino that has to fall for a true global power shift to happen is psychology. For decades, the playbook for any country facing a problem was simple. Call Washington. Need security? Call the US Navy. Need development funds? Call the IMF or the World Bank, institutions largely controlled by the US and its allies. That psychological dependence is fading. When a developing nation needs a new airport or a dam today, they don't have to go through the slow, bureaucratic, and often politically conditional process of the IMF anymore. They can often get a faster, more streamlined deal from a China-backed development bank, often with fewer political strings attached, even if the long-term debt terms are risky. This change in where countries go for help for finance, infrastructure, or technology is the quietest, yet most powerful, sign that the global architecture has changed. The US-led system is still massive, functional, and deeply entrenched. But for the first time in 80 years, the alternatives are real, accessible, and increasingly sophisticated. The world is no longer forced to use the original operating system. They're running parallel systems, dual booting, or migrating altogether. So what does this all mean for us? What's the takeaway from this massive, often invisible shift in global power? First, it means we need to recalibrate our understanding of what power even looks like. For decades, we've been conditioned to think of power in terms of aircraft carriers, military parades, and grand presidential summits. We watch the G7 meetings and assume that's where all the decisions are made. But that's like trying to understand the internet by only looking at the homepage of Google. The real action, the deep foundational shifts, are happening elsewhere. We need to start looking at the shipyards in Pakistan, not just as industrial sites, but as critical nodes in new maritime trade routes that bypass traditional choke points. We need to pay attention to who is signing the rare earth mining contracts in Africa, because those minerals are the lifeblood of our entire digital and green energy future. We need to track the fiber optic cables landing on the shores of Southeast Asia, because whoever lays that cable controls the flow of data, the currency of the 21st century. Forget the old adages. Power today isn't just measured in missiles and might. It's measured in metric tons of cement being poured for new infrastructure. It's measured in lines of code that build new digital ecosystems. And it's measured in terabits per second of connectivity that tie nations together. Cement, code, and connectivity. That's the new trinity of global influence. The countries that master these are the ones shaping our tomorrow, often without firing a single shot. It's a quiet conquest, happening in boardrooms and construction sites, not on battlefields. Second, we need to prepare for a future defined by instability, not dominance. Think about it. A world with one overwhelmingly powerful nation, a single global sheriff, is relatively predictable. It might not be fair, and you might not like the sheriff's methods, but you generally know the rules of the road. There's a certain stability, even if it's an imposed one. But that's not the world we're living in anymore. We are now in a world with multiple competing power centers. Imagine a neighborhood with several powerful families, each with their own security force, their own set of rules for their territory, their own currency for their local market, and even their own private communication network. That neighborhood is inherently more volatile. Disputes can escalate quickly. Alliances can shift overnight. It's a far more complex and unpredictable environment. This is our world now. We have the American bloc, with its dollar-centric financial system and vast network of alliances. We have the rising Chinese bloc, with its Belt and Road Initiative creating a parallel infrastructure and the digital yuan challenging the supremacy of the dollar. We have a resurgent Russia using its energy resources as a geopolitical weapon. And we have emerging powers like India, Brazil, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, all refusing to be mere pawns in someone else's game. They are creating their own spheres of influence, building their own ecosystems, and demanding a seat at the table. This inherent volatility sounds scary, and in many ways it is. The risk of miscalculation is higher. Regional conflicts could have global ripple effects more quickly. But there's another side to this coin: resilience. When a system has a single point of failure, a crisis in the dominant power can bring the whole structure crashing down. Think of the 2008 financial crisis. But a multipolar system, with its redundancies and competing networks, might be more adaptable. If one system falters, others can pick up the slack. It's chaotic, but it's also potentially more robust, like a forest ecosystem compared to a monoculture farm. And here's the truly fascinating part, the good news if you will. This new multipolar world offers immense opportunity for the so-called middle powers or swing states. For decades, countries in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia were often forced to pick a side in the Cold War, their fates decided in Washington or Moscow. Their agency was limited. Today that's completely changed. These nations are no longer just pieces on a chessboard. They are becoming players in their own right. They can leverage the competition between the major blocs to their advantage. They can get a port built by a Chinese company, secure a defense deal with the United States, attract tech investment from Europe, and sell commodities to India. They have options. They can play one power off against another to get the best possible deal for their own people. This gives them a voice and a level of strategic autonomy they haven't possessed in generations. They are the new kingmakers, and their decisions will increasingly shape the global balance of power. But with great opportunity comes great challenge. The flip side of this new agency is intense and escalating competition. This isn't just friendly rivalry, it's a fundamental contest for the future. We're already seeing it. The economic competition manifests as trade wars, tariffs, and battles over technological standards. Who will set the rules for 6G? Whose AI governance model will prevail? These are not abstract questions. They will determine the future of global commerce. The digital competition is even more fierce. We're witnessing the splintering of the internet, the splinternet, with a Western, open model competing against a Chinese, state-controlled model. Your data, your privacy, and your access to information could soon depend on which digital bloc you live in. And of course, there's the military dimension. While the great powers are hesitant to confront each other directly, they are competing fiercely through proxies, arms sales, and the establishment of military bases in strategic locations around the world. For the average person, this means that the simple things we've taken for granted, things like international trade, travel, and even online security, are going to get a lot more complicated. Supply chains will become less reliable. Getting a visa might depend more on your country's geopolitical alignment. The digital services you use might be blocked in certain parts of the world. Navigating this fragmented world will require a new level of awareness and adaptability from all of us. This global power shift isn't some distant prediction for the year 2030 or 2050. It is not a hypothetical scenario from a think tank report. It is the reality of today. It has already happened. It happened quietly, incrementally, while we were all distracted by the 24-hour news cycle, by political dramas and celebrity scandals. While we were looking the other way, the very foundations of the world order were being rebuilt. The world we were born into is not the world we live in now. And understanding this shift, recognizing these new forms of power and these new centers of influence, is the first step toward navigating the turbulent but opportunity-rich decades that lie ahead. Now, I want to hear from you. This new world order is full of surprises. Which country do you think is the biggest dark horse winner in this new multipolar world, and why? Is it a tech-savvy nation like Vietnam, a resource-rich country in Africa, or maybe a diplomatic heavyweight like Brazil? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden forces shaping our world, and you want to understand the future better, please hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this. And don't forget to ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.